recognize that tech is going to drive the behavior. So, Len, what software solutions do you see most companies using when they want to track their suppliers, ingredients, documents? How are companies managing it today to cobble it together, or some of them building their own? What are you guys seeing?
Yeah, absolutely. And sort of reading from the answers there are many companies in the small to mid-size range that are still operating on spreadsheets, groups of spreadsheets, and file management systems to organize their documentation. Mm-hmm. Many have done some proprietary things. Others, the larger companies that are already invested with ERP solutions, are making those ERP systems work to support regulatory compliance. And that's not necessarily those that are built for it, and it gets very, very complicated. Some others have their own cloud-based systems. There are other technology providers, something like the Dietary that's now Trace Games. We're seeing some presence in the marketplace for that. And there's others that are really just trying to figure it out. And then there are the blockchain type of solutions that we're seeing in other industries where that supply chain transparency imperative is being driven. One of the aspects that should be mentioned is that recalls and recall management is a part of the good manufacturing practice requirements. And I did see some data last week that a company that was involved in a recall had gone from several days to several minutes through the capabilities of modern technology.
That's awesome. I'll kind of give show the result of that poll real quick to you guys. And so when we look at everything we have to consider when we're building, selecting, or buying a different software platform and developing this process around that with our team, whether it's a spreadsheet or not, because sometimes, listen, if you're just starting off, you're going to start with what you can afford and what you're doing. Using some cloud-based spreadsheet in Google Drive or something else may be what we have. But we're looking at document master data management. We're looking at ingredient quality management, central regulatory repository information, transaction inventory, as well as ingredient traceability. And you touched upon it, recalls and returns, all are just part of the industry. So, when our team started to look at, hey, we want to build a solution, we base that on, working for, our execs, and many of our team members worked for close to a decade at SAP and have been doing track and trace consulting for, big major companies, J&J, Roche, AmerisourceBergen. We worked really closely with this industry, the dietary supplement and natural products industry, to say, hey, what are the special needs and unique requirements that are unique to this industry that are going to need a platform that can meet its expectations? And the blockchain technology isn't all that old. I mean, you're only talking a couple years old, and it's a lot of buzz, and it's new. So what I want to talk a little bit about is what is blockchain and how it can actually help, of course, the industry as a whole, but also individual companies. So, blockchain, ultimately, it's a kind of encrypted, decentralized digital ledger, right? So think about, if you're going to type a piece of data in, and it can capture any type of data, it's going to associate this with, I think it's a 27-digit code. And anytime, you change a period, you change a sentence, you change a word, or change that documentation, that code will change, and it'll show when and where and who changed that code. So it's basically immutable, going to encrypt all your information so that it's locked down. What I want to do is make sure that people know what blockchain isn't. Blockchain is not cryptocurrency. We often talk about Bitcoin and associate with blockchain. Somehow they become synonymous. They're not. It's Bitcoin has blockchain technology built into it, but they're not the same. So that's why probably one of the best case studies for using blockchain is in supply chain management. Hey, how can I track what's been passed from one company to the next? Hey, here's what I gave you. Here's what we received. And now you've got this ledger that's going to track that. So some of the key benefits around this is auditability, tight record keeping, and going to ensure that there's no data tampering and information integrity. And sometimes, listen, I mistype emails all the time, right? And I'll go back and read emails man, I can't believe I said that, but let's just make sure that things are pure. So another misnomer about blockchain technology, I spoke to one leader and he's like, man, why would I put all my information in the blockchain? It's public, everybody's going to see it. Well, no, there's different types of blockchains. There is a public blockchain. I believe Bitcoin is public, where people can see the transactions that are occurring and taking place. But there's a private blockchain, which is what TagOne is, which means it's permission-based. Your enterprise owns it. You control it. You can control who can see and what they see. But at the end, it's auditable, and it's immutable for you guys internally. Then you may have a consortium blockchain, which is several companies or organizations working together with permissions. So I just want to clear that up. So specifically for the natural products industry, what this does is, of course, it drives accountability. We talked about that accountability and transparency, specifically with the supply chain. Man, I've got this ingredient of this dietary supplement. Now I know where this came from and what's in it specifically. So companies that are willing to share, hey, or invest a lot in their dietary supply chain products, now that can get to the consumer. So Len, from your perspective, how do you see this technology benefiting the industry and the end consumer?
Well, I mean, I want to go and maybe narrate a little bit of a personal story. At the beginning of February, I went to West Africa. I went to Ghana on a search for an ingredient, and I found that ingredient on a mountaintop 3 hours north of Accra. And it was a village at the end of the highway, and we were able to meet with a couple of the farmers. And the farmer that we spoke with, took us down to her plot of land, showed us her process, and then we met with the village chief, and we were able to understand that this village had been producing this ingredient for 400 or 500 years, no real commercial. They wanted to maintain the integrity, some of the challenges that they had occurred. At its very simplest, having that story told through the ingredient, through the processing, through to a finished product that incorporates material that's grown on this woman's farm in Ghana, I think is a huge consumer win.
Yep, absolutely. And I think consumers want to know. We want to see, and here's a visualization, using turmeric. We've developed a mobile application where it's very simple to use, where growers and farmers can capture information from the seed level and put in information like water and harvest time and seed information, up to 49 attributes, which can be modified for our partner. And down below, I gave an illustration, which is like a little block. Like, hey, okay, there's a block of information, then they pass that on, or that's captured into our mobile solution. Our desktop solution, where hey, the processor may put in their information and it's processed and it's passed on to the importer and the manufacturer. All that information is connected to ultimately create that end-to-end transparency that we all want to see. Now, I'm going to get into it in a second, but it's usually going to start with this manufacturer, right, or the brand, and they start with one up, one down. Hey, who's my buyer? Who's my supplier? And how can I just track that a little bit better? But now you see all these blocks of information connecting to connect those dots, and it's going to take time. We don't want to let everybody know hey, you're going to invest in this supply chain transparency model, and it's going to happen in a couple months. We're going to start, what I'm going to talk about in a second is just getting your master data clean and how important that can be. But Len, as an industry expert, when you look at this graphic, how do you see this potentially impacting and benefiting the industry as a whole?
Well, I think that people that are on a standardized system like this raises the bar of expectations and puts in place some expectations of entry and participation. I think that there's benefits to recall. I think there's benefits to the checks and quality, the identification of the third-party contractors, gathering the information, and just having that authority. I think it becomes technologies like this are going to create a differentiation between the players that are anticipating the consumer need 10 years from now and those that are just sort of riding a wave of popularity. I think it's a differentiator. Definitely.
So, this is a quick screenshot of what we call TagOne Harvest, which is our farmer app. And your story about the farmer in Ghana is just really powerful, because now we can empower the growers who are, and honestly, they're the most important person in this process, right? At the end, it's about the growers and the consumers. How do we tighten that up? And then all you folks that are working so hard to do things the right way, like, as one of our clients says, to unlevel the playing field. Right now, when I look at a shelf, it all looks the same to me. How can I scan a product to say, wait, where did this come from, right? So I think ultimately that's, like, this tool here is going to capture it. And now we're going to get into probably what is not all that sexy of a component, but really important and hard to do, which is that operational process, which is the topic today, and technology that can drive that process. So one of them we get into is master data. And we talk about capturing data. Like, there's not a whole lot of things that are a whole lot more boring, but so important in what we're doing, which is simple things like just having a clean list of our suppliers and buyers. And you think, well, of course, that shouldn't be a problem, Joe. Well, we worked with one of our clients, and they had around 700 different suppliers on a spreadsheet and in a database. After we helped them clean it up, there's a lot of redundancy. Some may be written like it with ink, or another one may not have it. Some may have old addresses that they moved from one to another, which is problematic. And then some of them they don't do business with anymore or have expired certificates. So after we cleaned that up, it was down to 200 different suppliers they're working with. The other one area, which is like getting your own products and SKUs cleaned up in one centralized area. And the third is ingredients. And Len, this is an area you're an expert in. Talk about just how challenging and tricky having a clean list of ingredients that you're working with in your own company can be.
Well, and I know that we've got a couple of botanicals experts that are listening in, and you got trade names, commodity names, botanical names, brand names, alternative names, so that standardization of data is absolutely imperative in order to really understand what you're making and what's going into the products. The verification process is another area. There's examples in the industry when a product, an ingredient goes out of stock, and companies don't have a recourse that's ready to go for an alternative ingredient. Obviously, you want to substantiate, you want to support the ones that are proprietary, that you're basing your science and your claims on, but there you need to make sure your nomenclature is accurate and that you've got the proper inventory flows. So this ingredient standardization, this integrity at the ingredient level is absolutely an imperative.
What are some things that companies can do, like, all right, whether they're on a spreadsheet or an ERP, you talk about all the different nomenclatures. What are some processes you would recommend that they integrate in order to keep an ingredient list clean?
Well, I guess it would be the cross categorization. So you're always going back to the appropriate fundamental name. Mm-hmm. You've got to make sure you're attributing your brand and IP, so you've got to have that properly categorized. You've got to have your suppliers verified by ingredients, or you've got to make sure if it's a single source ingredient that you've got the communications pathway that you'll never run out of supply, or that they're updating information on technology and or applications on an ongoing basis if those applications do change. You need to have all those things in place.
And I mean, you talked about supplier verification. So specifically, you shared an anecdote before. Well, what if a company runs out of stock, right? So talk a little about how many companies may respond, because that can be challenging, the kind of problems that can occur from that.
Well, the worst case scenario is that the company adulterates. Hopefully that doesn't happen too often. There are outliers, and that's not really good for the industry, the category, or consumers. The worst part about this is that if you are forced to discontinue a product, I mean, it's tough enough to get consumers to comply, repeat purchase. There's a lot of work that goes into that. You suddenly have to discontinue a product because you've got a shortage of supply. That's horrific for your market, for your business opportunity, especially if it's a large product.
So something that we've integrated into our solution is, granted, our platform can be customized depending on the size of the company and also for different roles within the organization. But one area of risk is you have one person, they're scrambling to find an ingredient, they pick up the phone, they call, it gets delivered. Like, how to alleviate and have a workflow process so that way, hey, let's go into TagOne, let's invite a potential partner, what we call a prospect, to join the company. They log in, they put in all the required information that you need, all the documentation, and now there's a workflow that another individual is going to review that, and approve that or reject that and say, here's other information we need. So that way, going through having like a process to go through that approval can eliminate just kind of what we call in the military pencil whipping something in order to get it done fast because it's urgent, which could cause issues down the road. How important do you see having, whether it's with a platform like ours or not, having a workflow and standard operating procedures integrated to verified partners?
Any legitimate company needs a solution for this. That's an absolute imperative. Otherwise, the risks are too great. It's just bad business practice. You need a system to manage this. And there's a requirement, the checklist requirement from the 16 items earlier, that supplier verification process protocol, we've identified it as a priority. It's not the contract manufacturer's responsibility, it's the brand's responsibility as well. It obviously impacts the contract manufacturers, but you can't be in business on a sustainable basis without that system.
So another area that companies challenge is documentation. So, Len, how important is having documents organized in a centralized area, both from, having to share this with the FDA, internally, executives, like how important is document management within an organization?
It is absolutely critical, and it's tougher and tougher with the various regulations and implications and certs and seals and allergens and all of those things. But it's another one of those right ways to do the business, but it's also a regulatory requirement that you have a system that allows you to track your risks. And when you're preparing for an FDA audit, the expectation is that you're going to have information accessible very readily. You also want to shorten the time of an audit so that they're in and out. The more time that they're on site, the more opportunity, frankly, that they can find other things to investigate and deeper aspects of the operation to query. If you can be efficient and accurate, it's going to make that entire audit experience go much better.
Yeah, I mean, I think the word audit probably is worse than the word dentist. I think people automatically get kind of tense with like, oh my goodness, and you don't really know what's going to happen. So, I mean, having everything organized is certainly critical. And so, here we see, there's going to be expirations, right? So different certificates and validations are going to expire at some point in time. You and I were talking a little bit before about kind of an expiration date management plan. Like, how would you recommend companies manage, expiration management, and what are some challenges in doing that seem seemingly basic?
Well, I mean, the easiest is making sure you have a homegrown database with alerts and a nice, clear user interface. That's probably the price of entry, because expiration date is another one of those fundamentals. Practically speaking, though, companies are operating from spreadsheets. There's no alerts built into their systems, and things can go awry. When we were, as Trust Transparency, doing some product testing on some random lots, we had expired material that could have been purchased because companies don't necessarily have full control over that. But also, products can fail label claim because they're over their expiry date. So you get into a whole mess. So having this is imperative.
So, we were talking before that it would be pretty basic for a company to put everything in a spreadsheet. And even the danger of a spreadsheet, which is who has access to that. Does somebody put in a wrong date? Like, it's easy to put 2018 versus 2019. And then who has visibility on, hey, if somebody on your team is using that spreadsheet and they leave the company, they're sick, they go to maternity leave or something of that nature, well, how can somebody else see, hey, this is expiring soon, to give you a heads up? And I think those are some variables that we put into our system. Hey, what are some data analytics to tell us what's coming down the pipeline? Like, hey, this is going to expire in 3 months. We need to act today. And by the way, here's your tasks and approvals in order to eliminate some of those mistakes or things that were really important to us that we wanted to integrate. So, getting into another area that can be really complex are the transactions, shipments coming in. There's manufacturing that's going to occur, i.e. transformation with all these different ingredients, and then you're going to ship it out. So, Len, I imagine that one area that companies lose a lot of visibility is that all these lot numbers, like they're all different systems, is once you start to blend and manufacture something, like how would you recommend companies manage that transformation process in order not to lose visibility from when it's an ingredient to it's a product on the other side?
Well, at a fundamental, really good filing systems, but it's more than that. And again, you're now talking contract manufacturers and processors and all of the people in between, from an ingredient in a field to a finished product on a shelf. Very convoluted, and the more automated the process, the more streamlined the process, the more foolproof the process, it's going to enable that proper tracking, which is really going to impact your recall times.
Yep, excellent. So knowing that it's complex, I mean, our team put together, hey, all right, you've got the clean master data, right? All your suppliers are approved, all your ingredients are squared away and approved, all the locations have the right certification. So when a transaction occurs, it's much easier to say, hey, here's what we received. All right, you're going to put all the ingredient supplier information in there, and it's all in a drop down to make it very simple. All the proper certifications, COAs, are dropped in there, and then which can be done both on a desktop or mobile device as well. And then when it comes to the manufacturing portion, hey, we can only pull from ingredients that exist, right? And it only exists if we store that information in our database in TagOne already. Now we know it's going to also give us indications about what are we running out of. If we only have 100, kilograms of turmeric and we just used 90, there's only 10 left. We can't manufacture with 50. It just doesn't exist in the system. So then we're also pulling from different lot numbers to track those lot numbers throughout this whole process. So all this is going to be able to connect where did it come from, what happened to it, and where did it go. And that leads to our next, and all this is blockchain enabled, right? So that leads to our next slide, which is really the power of TagOne, which is our visual map. Hey, now we can see visually who is our supplier, what's the transaction date, what's the lot number, what's the product, where did it go in the location, all in one visual map where you can click on any one of these, and it's going to expand and give you more information. So when you look at this visual map, Len, what do you think this can do in an audit? And also, hey, I want to have a partnership with a new customer. Hey, Mr. Customer, let me show you how we operate. What does that do, and how does that change the game for somebody, Len?
Yeah, so we'll start with the audit. I think being able to map this visually and traceability all the way up the supply chain, I think is going to make a very favorable impression. I don't know that it's going to close the audit right there, but it's going to show you that the ducks are in a row and that the manufacturing is buttoned up and that the documentation is there and the proper assignments and accountabilities are there. If I am a brand and I'm looking at this, I'm going to feel pretty confident, but I'm also going to look to my contract manufacturer. Seems like I'm picking on them. Don't get me wrong. There's a lot of really great contract manufacturers out there, but if they're able to show me this, I'm going to be theirs for life. If I'm a manufacturer or a brand,